Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome into a new episode of Capitol View, a weekly webcast brought to you by the Daily Journal and djournal.com. I'm your host, Brad Locke, and of course, this webcast talking about state politics, what's going on with the Mississippi Legislature in Jackson. Of course, we go down now to Bobby Harrison, our Capitol Bureau Chief, covering everything that's going on with the legislature now in its first, I guess, full week of session, Bobby. Second, started last Tuesday, so we're about a week into it. Let's start off, I guess, by just talking about, what are you looking forward to this week? You're going to kind of get the ball rolling on a few things, perhaps?
Well, what's going on right now is more, you could almost argue behind the scenes.
Okay.
In the first 4 days, the House passed one bill. It passed out of committee in the Senate and is now pending on the Senate calendar. They may take it up today or they may wait until tomorrow. And that's the bill that allows local school boards to go ahead and appoint a new superintendent instead of holding a special election if an elected superintendent leaves office for whatever reason. Of course, in 2019, all superintendents will be appointed and all the elected superintendents will be replaced, and the local school boards will be in charge of appointing all superintendents. And this just allows those school districts to speed up the process if they have a vacancy in their district. But mainly right now, bills are being filed and they're being referred to committees by House Speaker Philip Gunn and Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves in the Senate, and probably be a little bit more action this week. But it is still, the first few weeks of the session are notoriously slow. Next Tuesday, I think it is, Governor Phil Bryant will have his State of the State speech, and it'll pick up some after that probably.
All right. Well, you mentioned bills being filed. A couple have already been filed by Representative Alice Clark of Jackson. She's represented that area since about 85. And I want to talk about what she would like to see done, a state lottery. One of 6 states in the nation that don't have one. And of course, as we've talked about before here and elsewhere, Bobby, when you see that big Powerball jackpot, people's eyes get big and they go drive across state lines, Louisiana or Mississippi, Louisiana or Tennessee, to buy their lottery tickets. Arkansas, exactly. Yeah. So that's money that leaves Mississippi, and that's a big argument for the lottery, is that we need to bring that money back. So, and we'll get into the I guess the pros and cons of that in a minute. But first off, this is a train Alice Clark has been riding for several years, isn't it?
Yeah, she's filed a bill every year since 2003, at least, and she might have filed it some years before then. For some reason, in 2002, she didn't file that bill. She must have had a brain freeze, or but and what makes it a little different this year is Governor Phil Bryant, Republican, social conservative, has said publicly that he would entertain discussions about a lottery, which, I mean, it doesn't say he would necessarily be for it, but that's a far cry from what he said about this time last year when he said, matter of fact, that he was opposed to any lottery legislation. So that kind of gives some people, lottery proponents, a little bit of hope. But as I think I wrote, or the headline said in my story this weekend, the odds are still real long in terms of a lottery passing in Mississippi. You may have there may be a better chance that the lottery passing than you win in the Powerball, but the odds are still long for that too.
Bobby, I mean, there's some pretty clear arguments for and against the lottery. A lot of people have a moral objection to the lottery, calling it gambling. And of course, we do have casinos. We've had those for several years now. But as you mentioned on the Memo podcast you were on today as well, this is something more that would be state sponsored when you have a lottery. So that's more of the state basically kind of running it and advertising it and trying to get people to play it. And I guess maybe that's where an even greater moral objection might come into certain people.
Right. I suppose in all states that have lotteries, there's a certain amount of the lottery revenue that goes to administer the lottery, and part of that administration is advertising for people to buy lottery tickets. So it's more of whereas a casino is kind of it's the state is not directly running the casinos. They're just authorizing that the casinos can be operated, whereas with the lottery, the state would ultimately they may hire an independent group to actually run the lottery, but that independent group would report to the state. So it'd be more of a hands-on, that the state would actually be operating the lottery. And that, for some people, that's just a bridge too far. And but as we talk, as you mentioned, Brad, the primary argument for a lottery these days for a lot of people who used to be opposed to it is you talked about that Powerball. About this time last year, there was I can't remember how much money it was, but it was just
a lot.
It was a huge Powerball, and you just heard. I'm sure you. I mean, I had friends. I'm sure you did too, who were driving across state lines just to buy those Powerball tickets, and that money leaves the state and never comes back. The state doesn't get any share of that money. So that's the primary argument for a lot of people for passing a lottery, and the fact that the revenue collections are down just kind of enhances that argument, if you would.
Yeah. Obviously, revenue collections have been a problem. Fully funding education has been a problem, and a lot of people would like to see revenue generated by a lottery to go toward education. And that's another issue within the issue, Bobby, is do you dedicate it all to education, which Governor Bryant doesn't really seem keen on that idea, or does it go into the general fund? So I guess that's if you get to the point of, hey, we've got a lottery, you still got to figure out where the money goes.
Yeah, that'd be the next fight, but that fight may be, that may be putting the horse before the buggy. But Representative Clark has always argued she wants to create a college scholarship program like they have in Georgia, and I think they have one in Arkansas like that now too. Whereas other people, Jody Stevenson, a representative from Temple County from Ripley, he said he'd like to see the money go for roads and bridges, and infrastructure, which of course has been a big problem, and the legislature has not been able to reach a consensus how to spend more money on roads and bridges. So he says he would like to see the money go there. The governor said he'd like to see it go to the general fund, I guess, if there was a lottery. And of course, if the money goes to the general fund, the largest share of that money then would go to education, because education gets the largest share of the general fund money. So if the lottery passed, it would, I guess, in theory, help education, whether it was dedicated to education or not.
In your story you had on Sunday, you quoted Bubba Carpenter. He represents the folks up. He's from Burnsville. Represents folks up in the northeast corner of the state. He said, "quote All my constituents want it." I don't know if he took a scientific survey, but apparently he's got some good feedback that a lot of people would like to see it. And he voted for it last year when a bill came up, and so there seems like there's a fair amount of bipartisan support, right?
Right. There was no bill last year, Brad, but what happened was there was legislation came out of committee that dealt with bingos and fantasy sports, and both those bills were amended to enact the lottery in the House, and it was a strong bipartisan votes on both bills. And it was interesting because until the early 1990s, the state constitution prohibited a lottery, and at that time there was the vote to amend the constitution to take that prohibition out, and that amendment to take out the prohibition on a lottery passed statewide. But up in northeast Mississippi, most of the counties, I think probably 12 out of 16 of the counties voted against taking that prohibition out. So our area of the state has been viewed as an area that has not been pro-lottery. So when you see folks like Bubba Carpenter, Jody Stevenson, and other legislators from northeast Mississippi vote in favor of a lottery proposal, that kind of indicates that maybe the attitudes even in northeast Mississippi are changing on the issue.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit. Talk education. Carrie Wright, the state superintendent of education, met last week and spoke with the House Education Committee, giving them an update on some of the issues. One of those being the special education vouchers. Of course, he had the, make sure I get it right, it's a long name, the Equal Opportunity for Students with Special Needs Act, passed a couple of years ago, Bobby. Gives, these parents of kids with special needs, gives them a $6,500 voucher every year they can apply for. The main concern here is that people are not everybody's using these vouchers, and you've had a lot of kids have gone back into public school, right?
Right. The voucher is would allow a special education student to pursue private education options, and for this current school year, I think I don't have the numbers in front of me. You do, Brad, but I think 425 were awarded, which was the maximum which was the amount of money that was available for those vouchers. It was done through ironically, a lottery, lottery to award those vouchers. But of the 425 that were awarded, I think about 110 of those students ended up back in this public schools instead of taking advantage of those vouchers. And this is because this was for school choice proponents, this was a huge issue when this legislation was passed to allow vouchers to leave the public schools and pursue private education options. And thus far, the vouchers have not been used to the level that are going to be used. There may be a lot of reasons for that. One of the reasons might be that, in a lot of areas of the state, particularly up in Northeast Mississippi, there's just not a lot of private school options for for special needs students in particular. And then when they get in, and a lot of these students, when they get into the private schools, they realize that schools can't offer, may not be offering the services that the public schools were offering, because a lot of times those services for special needs children cost a lot more than $6,500. So there's a lot of reasons, and we'll see what the legislature does with this bill during, if anything, with the session, whether they, the law calls for an increased amount of funding for the over a staggered number of years for this proposal, but if the vouchers are not going to be used at the level they thought they were going to be used, the legislature might decide not to increase that funding. We'll just have to see what happens.
All right. You'll keep an eye on that, I'm sure, Bobby, along with everything else that's going on down there with the state legislature with the 2017 session in full swing. Again, Capitol View is a weekly webcast coming to you every Monday about 2 p.m. You can watch live at djournal.com or watch the replay later on. And, of course, you can follow Bobby on Twitter at Bobby Harrison9 and look for his stories every day in your daily journal and at djournal.com. That's it for this episode of Capitol View. We'll be back next week. So until then, Bobby, enjoyed my time with you, sir.
All right, I enjoyed it too. Brad, who do you like tonight?
Oh, man, it's hard to pick against Bama. So until someone beats them, I'll just have to pick Bama. Clemson's got a shot, though. Clemson,
that's probably a smart money. All right, take care.
And that does it for your sports segment of Capitol View today. All right. Y'all have a good week. We'll see you next time.
All right.